Our scripture reading today, church, is from the book of James, chapter 3, verses 1 through 12. It reads this: "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers and sisters, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For all of us make many mistakes. Anyone who makes no mistakes in speaking is perfect, able to keep the whole body in check with a bridle. If we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we guide their whole bodies. Or look at ships. Though they are so large that it takes strong winds to drive them, yet they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire. And the tongue is a fire. The tongue is placed among our members as a world of iniquity. It stains the whole body, sets on fire the cycle of nature, and is itself set on fire by hell. For every species of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by the human species. But no one can tame the tongue, a restless evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse those who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and brackish water? Can a fig tree, my brothers and sisters, yield olives, or a grapevine figs? No more can salt water yield fresh." This is the word of the Lord. This past summer, on our family vacation to Aruba, we signed up to go horseback riding at the large national park there. Now, I'd only gone horseback riding a handful of times in my life, so as you can imagine, I was excited about the opportunity to ride a horse through the rocky terrain, up and over a small range of mountains, and down the other side to the ocean, where we would have the opportunity to jump off some small cliffs into some beautiful natural pools. It was going to be our adventure for the week. And so when we arrived at the small ranch, the owner led my family and several other families out to meet the horses, and he explained that he would be matching each individual with the horse that fit their personality. So you can imagine the pride that swelled up in me when he pointed at me and said, "You are going to ride Titan, the largest horse and the leader of the group." My mind immediately went to the idea that I was chosen because Titan needed a strong leader to be able to manage him. But church, it didn't take long for my ego to be deflated, as it soon became evident that I wasn't chosen for my strength and confidence. Rather, I was chosen to ride Titan because at over 200 pounds, I was the heaviest member of the group, and it was going to require the largest, strongest horse to carry my 200 plus pounds over that small mountain range and down the other side. Let's just say that I prayed for Titan many times on our journey, both for his sake and for mine as he hauled me up and down that rocky slope. Now, for those of you who ride horses, you'll agree that you learn pretty quickly that the horse is simply one gigantic piece of muscle. And if I'm honest, it was pretty terrifying when I first climbed up as I felt the strength and power of the horse beneath me. It becomes clear that there is no way that a human can overpower a horse with brute strength to make it do what it wants, or to force it to go where it wants to go. The horse is bigger and stronger. But what is absolutely incredible to me is that what does enable the rider to direct the horse and lead it where the rider wants it to go is a tiny piece of metal in the horse's mouth called the bit. The bit rests inside the horse's mouth between the natural gap in his teeth and is connected to the leather straps, the reins that the rider holds, and by the pulling of the reins applies pressure to the horse's jaw, communicating to the horse where you want to go. It doesn't hurt the horse or force the horse, but rather it communicates with the horse. As one website reads, soft hands don't need to do much more than close their fingers around the reins to elicit a response from a horse. You see, because of the tiny bit in the horse's mouth, my children could have easily steered Titan over that mountain. I wasn't special, just heavy. In James chapter 3, he uses this example of the bit as well as the image of a ship's rudder to explain the power that the human tongue has. Like the bit and the rudder, the tongue is a tiny object that, despite its diminutive size, is able to control a much larger object. The human tongue is one of the smallest parts of the human body, and physically it's less powerful than our arms and legs and even our head, but despite its size, it has tremendous power that can affect not only the life of an individual, but the life of a family, an organization, a community. An arm might be able to swing a hammer to build a house, something a tongue could never do. And church, I challenge you after service to try and pick up a hammer with your tongue. But a tongue can motivate, instruct, direct, and encourage thousands of people to build a skyscraper, something one person could never do alone. The potential that lies within the human tongue to create, to transform, to bless lives is incredible. But James doesn't introduce the power of the tongue to celebrate it in this chapter, but rather he introduces the power of the tongue to warn us that with this power, great harm can be done. Now, we don't know who specifically James was addressing this letter to, but we do know that James, the brother of Jesus, was the leader of the Church of Jerusalem, the first formal Christian community. And as new churches were being developed across the region, he was witnessing these church communities suffer, as teachers and members spoke in ways that were not edifying and uplifting, but rather were tearing one another down. In chapter 2, James sets the standard for behavior between people by sharing what he calls the royal law. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But what he is witnessing is that in the midst of conflict, the church communities were full of strife, in part because people were not speaking to one another in love. His third example of the tongue is more sobering, that the powerful tongue can do damage in the same way that it only takes a spark to start a fire that can destroy a whole forest. This powerful tongue is capable of great accomplishment, and in the same way, it is capable of great harm. Now, this has always been true in every generation, but these past few years, it hasn't been hard to see how the tongue can cause harm and division within our country as strong emotions over politics, over the response to the pandemic, over issues of race and human sexuality and countless other issues have caused individuals and groups to speak to one another in harmful and demeaning ways. James acknowledges that the tongue is hard to tame, and laments that one minute we praise God, and in the next we curse people made in the very image of God. It is a painful contradiction. And I don't know about you, church, but I agree with James that the tongue is difficult to tame. And in the past years, I've been on my own journey to better understand why, so that I can do a better job living up to the royal law, that law that requires that I always act and speak in love. And I've discovered some things that have been helpful to me that I want to share with you as we all work together on this challenging task of taming the tongue. In my personal journey, I've found that it is much easier to speak life and love to others when people are in agreement with me, when there are few stressors and when things are going the way that I want. But the tongue is harder to tame when I'm under duress, when I feel threatened, when I'm fearful, or when I feel an injustice has been done to me or others. In these moments, it's easier for me to lose control of my tongue and say and respond in ways that aren't the most loving, that aren't uplifting. I'm not my best under duress. Can anyone else out there agree? Well, church, what has been an interesting learning for me is that there is science behind this. There's science behind James's claim that the tongue is hard to tame. And what I've learned is that our brains are divided into 3 parts, and each part has a different function. And one of the parts of our brain, the basal ganglia, is referred to as our reptilian brain because it is the most primitive part of our brains. It's the part of our brain that is focused on survival, and it is responsible for all of the functions that are required for life: breathing, our heartbeat, and also awareness and response to threats around us. It is this reptilian brain that scans for danger, and it is quick to respond to danger instinctually through the tactics of fight, flight, or freeze. When humans lived in more primitive environments where we were hunting and gathering, there were threats all around in the form of dangerous animals, of other tribes, and other geographic dangers. And in order to survive, the brain had to be on high alert and respond quickly all the time, because these threats could arise at any moment. And church, it served us well in that environment, but the challenge is that still today, it is the first part of our brains that is triggered when we feel big emotions. Emotions like fear or anger or stress. And unfortunately, although there might not be any physical threat, this part of the brain is telling us to fight or flee when we experience these big emotions. It is this part of the brain that is immediately activated and that wants to respond, not with a thoughtful, loving response, but with a survival response that is focused on self-preservation. When we have disagreements, or we feel disrespected, or we feel overwhelmed or highly stressed, while these things are rarely life-threatening, they feel similar to these threatening feelings, and they often trigger the reptilian brain. And if we aren't aware, our tongues can respond to others with hurtful words in an attempt to protect ourselves or to secure something we're afraid of losing. I have an embarrassing story to share in relation to this, but one which I think is important to illustrate this idea. Many years ago, when my children were much younger, I coached their recreational soccer teams. And one season, my son's team made it to the semifinals, and during most of the game, we were up 1-0. It was exciting and intense. And with only a few minutes left, the referee blew his whistle and called a penalty kick for the other team on a play that didn't look like a foul at all. In the intensity of the moment, I felt an injustice had been done to our team, and very quickly anger welled up in me. And without a thought, I yelled out across that field at the ref, declaring that it wasn't a foul and challenging his ability to ref. Now I know some of you are sitting there right now saying, "Oh my gosh, I hate those people who yell at children's games. I can't believe you're one of them, Pastor Keith." And trust me, church, I'm disgusted by that behavior too. And yet, there I was, overtaken in that moment by emotion, feeling like I was righting a wrong while really all I was doing was disrespecting another human being, embarrassing myself and my family, and setting a terrible example for the children around me. In that moment of intensity and felt threat, my reptilian brain told me to fight, and unfortunately, I let that emotion control me. What made it worse was that as I yelled, several other parents on our team began yelling too. As James says, a small spark can spread to a bigger fire. That was only a matter of seconds, and the ref quieted the other parents quickly and approached me to address me. He could have asked me to leave, but he didn't, and the game resumed. But when I did kind of calm down, it was embarrassing, and it was a humbling moment for me. I apologized to the team, explained why I was wrong, and I apologized to the parents. I apologized to the other coach, to the ref, and I'm thankful that I was met with grace at each step. But it also scared me a little, how quickly I could lose control of my tongue and cause harm to another, especially over something so insignificant. Even though an outburst like that was an anomaly for me, it started me on a journey of wanting to learn and understand so that it wouldn't happen again. A journey that's involved the practice of daily prayer and meditation to learn how to better calm myself down when I have big emotions, of therapy for a season to better understand these emotions, and of continued study. And while I'm sure many of you can't relate to that specific story, I think if we're honest, many of us have been overtaken by emotion in different settings, saying things that we wish we hadn't. The good news for me and for us, church, is that while our reptilian brain is the first to respond to the big threatening emotions, we don't have to listen to it. We do have a choice. The other part of our brain that is more logical, thoughtful, rational, more mature, that part that is unique to humans, that is more divine, is the prefrontal cortex. And when we resist the urge to react to the reptilian brain in those moments and calm ourselves down, we can choose to respond in a more loving and thoughtful way. We can make a choice to step back, to let the wave of emotion wash over us, and choose a loving way forward. What's been helpful for me is to understand better that feelings of anger, fear, anxiety aren't necessarily bad feelings to be avoided, but rather are feelings that are trying to tell us that something is wrong, that we need to respond to. When they well up, instead of reacting with our reptilian brain, the loving thing for ourselves and others is to take a step back and be curious. Be curious about where these feelings are coming from. Be curious about where the strong feelings in others are coming from. Sociologist Brené Brown affirms that anger is an important emotion that is important to feel. She states sometimes owning our pain and bearing witness to struggle means getting angry. Like an indicator light in a car tells us to pull over and check things out, anger is a very effective emotional indicator light that tells us to pull over and check things out. It isn't the solution, but it can point us to the fact that we need a solution to something that's wrong. By stopping to acknowledge that we are feeling big feelings, allowing ourselves to calm down and understanding where they're coming from, we can make more thoughtful and rational decisions that move us forward to gaining what it is we need while also respecting the humanity of the person that we are at odds with. We can move out of our reptilian brain and into our more mature, thoughtful brain. It's a shift from being reactive to thoughtfully responsive. To not losing control of our tongue, but rather choosing to calmly and thoughtfully respond in a way that respects the other. Sometimes we can think that taming the tongue means to be quiet when we feel angry, disrespected, or scared. We've all heard the expression, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And while I agree that we shouldn't say things that aren't nice, sitting on our feelings isn't ideal either, since they will typically find other unhealthy ways to leak out. The goal, I believe, is to learn to speak truthfully and lovingly. Another way it has been described is moving from being aggressive to being assertive. The aggressive person will speak their truth and seek to gain what they want with no regard for the dignity of the other person they are at odds with. But the assertive person chooses to confront conflict or pursue their passion with honesty while also treating others consistently with a cooperative spirit. Assertiveness looks like using an even tone instead of shouting or coercing. It looks like consistently maintaining respect rather than disregarding the other. It means keeping the other person's needs in perspective instead of ignoring others' needs as we put ours center stage. It means being open to multiple alternatives rather than being rigid and demanding. It means being guided by constructive motives rather than being destructive in nature. And it responds to resistance with calm firmness rather than responding to resistance with harshness. It is speaking truth in love, being honest while also holding the other person in high regard as people created in the image of God. The tongue uncontrolled can and does do great damage. And so James is giving it serious attention, so we will too. But it also can accomplish great things when under our control. Like riding a horse on a trip over the mountains to a beautiful ocean pool, we can see and experience beautiful things together as a church if we are continually committed to taming our tongues and respecting one another as the Imago Dei, even in our differences. Amen.